Mass shootings in the U.S. They've become so commonplace lately we can hardly keep up, much less report on all of them. And when the nation is averaging one mass shooting every day, think about that, one a day, it's hard for anyone to remember them all. The shootings seem to, pardon the pun, bleed into one another. So filmmaker A.J. Schnack's new film is a reminder. He takes us back to the places where mass shootings happened, and the only sounds you'll hear, they are from the 911 tapes at the time that the shots rang out.
Highway, the subject is still inside the business, 1365 South Waterman. It's in building number 3, possible active shooter.
6 will be en route.
I'll be making entry in a minute on the south side of the building. I have 3 units with me from Fontana PD.
Copy.
We have several down in the conference room, several down.
I recently sat down with the director of Speaking is Difficult to talk about the film and about gun violence itself. AJ, first off, for folks who don't make the connection to the title, Speaking is Difficult, talk about how that title came to be and the significance to the film.
Well, it kind of comes at the end of the film. We close with a speech that Gabby Giffords delivered to Congress after she had been involved in a mass shooting event in Tucson. And she said the words, speaking is difficult, but we must do something about this crisis. I take it also as a sort of a double meaning, which is that this is a topic that, while it continues to actually get worse, we know from research that was done at Harvard that in the last 5 years, mass shooting events have increased almost threefold than before 2011. We don't seem to be able to find the ways as a country or a culture to talk about the issues surrounding these kinds of events and what we could possibly do around it. The speaking about them has become almost impossible in the current political climate.
Town 911, what's the location of the emergency?
Sandy Hook School. I think there's somebody shooting in here. Sandy Hook School.
Okay, what makes you think that?
Because somebody's got a gun. I saw a glimpse of somebody. They're running down the hallway.
Okay.
They're still running. They're still shooting. Sandy Hook School, please. Oh.
Barbara.
Do not leave, please, okay? Stay where you are. Try to keep the kids calm. We do have troopers and officers on the scene, but I don't want you to leave because we do not have the shooter, okay?
You know, AJ, we've obviously covered far too often these kind of stories, and given the proximity of Newtown to us, we've had a lot of families who've lost loved ones on that tragic day, who will leave an indelible mark, of course, forever. But I've never seen it portrayed in the way that this film does. And I know, start a little bit with the genesis, and I know it was the Oregon shooting, which really for you triggered the idea for this, but also talk about how you chose to show these shootings in a far different way than anyone's seen before.
Well, yeah, you're right. When the Oregon shooting happened last fall, I'm involved in an online documentary journalism platform called Field of Vision. And one of the things we try to do is look at events as they're unfolding and how do we respond to them in a cinematic way that's different than perhaps you'll see traditionally in television news. And so when that shooting happened, one of the things that struck me was watching the social media reaction to the event, and that struck me as a very repetitive thing that we had seen numerous times before, where there's shock and outrage, and then ultimately finger pointing on both sides, and then it just sort of seems like it stops. People forget about it until the next one happens. So in talking about making this film, it was really about how do we show that these events continue and that they are echoes of one another. And that was sort of the first piece of like not just being about one event, but about many events that have happened in the last 5 years.
15 and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters, 14300 East Alameda Avenue. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium. 15 and 314, there is at least one person that's been shot, but they're saying there's hundreds of people just running around.
Lincoln, I've got 2 victims on the east side and the side of the theater. I need an ambulance here quick. We need rescue inside the auditorium, multiple victims. 7 down.
Copy, we'll notify fire. 7 down in Theater 9.
I've got a child victim. I need rescue at the back door of Theater 9 now. Inside of the theater is secure. We're bringing out bodies now. Get someone to the back as soon as you can.
Going back to the locations, which are very ordinary, normal places, and in a lot of cases, there's no remnants, no markers, no way for anyone to even know that these tragic events took place there. And I think there is a real sense when you see the places now, some of which are back in business, the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, for example, the Safeway in Tucson, Arizona. You do get the sense of both the presence and the absence that it exists in these locations after these events.
AJ, I would have thought that the target was to maybe shame some of the lawmakers in Washington of both parties who've allowed this tragic cycle that you describe as a new normal is somewhat acceptable or too hard to change. We've certainly had tons of conversations with lawmakers on this subject and how intractable it was or is. But instead, I read that your intended audience was the general audience, that they should stop accepting this instead of accepting or expecting Washington to do it for them.
Well, I think that, when we look at the Gabby Gifford shooting, I mean, every single member of Congress knows what that event that she was holding that day was like. It was a town hall, get to know your constituents out and about, and every single member of Congress was going to do an event very similar to that. They were going to go out and they were not going to have a Secret Service person protecting them. They were going to be probably with a 20-something aide as she was. And I think that fact that happened and there was still no response, not just after Newtown, but no response really in Washington after Tucson. I don't know that we can expect the lawmakers to do anything on this topic unless people are really willing to show that this is a conversation that they want to have, that they need to have, and that it's just not going to be acceptable to say that this is the price of doing business in America.
AJ, tell people where they can check out the film.
It is online and free worldwide at fieldofvision.org.
And again, that film, Speaking is Difficult. A.J. Schnack, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Up next, we'll take a look at some local headlines. Please stay with us.